All right, all right, all right. Welcome back to the Misfit Nation. If you have not had the chance, check out our first book, 13 Step Guide to Success. It is available in paperback and Kindle editions through Amazon. If you're listening or watching for the first time, thanks for joining us. And be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast apps. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, _Misfit Nation. So you'll stay up to date on all episodes as they release, while also having the opportunity of getting to hear the stories of our amazing guests. Speaking of which, our next guest is a nationally known speaker, podcaster, and author who has helped thousands of people start and build their own speaking business through his training company, The Speaker Lab. He is regularly featured in national media, including Forbes Incorporated, Entrepreneur, and Huffington Post. A podcaster since 2014, he has published over 400 podcast episodes. He loves talking all things speaking, entrepreneurship, marketing, family, and motivating other leaders and entrepreneurs. He lives with his wife and 3 daughters near Nashville, Tennessee. So without further ado, let's welcome to the Misfit Nation, Mr. Grant Baldwin. How are you, Grant?
Rich, thanks for letting me hang out with you, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Awesome. I'm glad we're able to connect, and we can almost throw a stone at each other as close as we are on the map. I mean, if one of us had a really cannon arm, I guess we can do it.
I was gonna say, man, I don't know about your arm, but I know mine, and it's not gonna get that far. But yeah,
either way, traffic on 24 to make it happen.
This is true. This is true.
So, Grant, if you don't mind, tell the audience a little bit about your backstory to how you got into speaking to where we are now.
Yeah. So way back in high school, I was actually involved in my local church, and my youth pastor had a really big impact on my life. And so that's kind of the path I was on. I went to Bible college. I was a youth pastor for a little while, and it gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And speaking was one of those things I felt like I was decent at. I wanted to do more of, and just had no idea, like, how does this world work? And so I started like emailing a bunch of other speakers and just like stalking speakers and just like, hey, someone just tell me like what to do. And I always kind of felt like I had the potential, but I needed the plan. I had the potential, but I needed the plan. And so eventually I started getting some feedback and getting some answers, and eventually started booking some gigs here and there, and was doing, 10 or so gigs the first year or so, and then 20 or 30 gigs. And eventually got to a point where I was doing about 60 or 70 speaking gigs a year, all over primarily the US. And it was awesome. Like, absolutely loved it. And then I had a bunch of people who were asking me like, hey, I want to be a speaker. Like, I've seen how you built your business. Like, tell me how to do that. And so then we started doing some teaching, coaching, training on that. And that's really been the past several years of the business now is, like you mentioned, run the Speaker Lab, where we teach people how to find and book paid speaking gigs, how to use speaking in their business. And that's what we do now. It's a ton of fun.
Awesome. I think I was introduced to the Speaker Lab through my former job, as they wanted us to have a better public speaking persona as we pitched the classes to our clients and such. And
nice.
I left that job before I took the classes, so it kind of went by the wayside. But I still get your emails all the time. So I've seen your name forever. And then when you came up on this, I was like, I might as well interview him, since I get an email from him almost every day inviting me to do something. I actually talked to Brittany Richmond, her for a while. Awesome lady.
Yeah.
And then the next call, everything kind of fell apart. The next call, so I kind of moved away from it. But I really enjoyed talking to her, and she had me sold. I was ready to go.
Yeah. Cool, man. Cool. Well, yeah, we know that like everyone's at a different stage in terms of like their speaking career, what it is they're wanting to do. And I think one of the nice things with speaking is there's people who want to speak 50, 60, 70, 100 times a year. And other people that are like, nah, I don't want to do that. I've got something good going, but I wouldn't mind speaking, 5 times or 10 times a year. But they have the same questions that I had when I got started. How do I find a gig? How much do I charge? What do I speak about? Who hires speakers? And speaking is just kind of like this mysterious black box. And so if we're able to kind of like demystify it and show like, no, like there's a process to it, like anything else. Like here's the steps you need to follow. Then hopefully we can simplify and get people on stages.
So say there's a person that's just coming out of like high school or midway through college, and they say, oh, I got something I want to say. I have a good story in my life. How do they become a speaker?
Yeah, that was a bit of me. Like whenever I got started was, I think one of the misconceptions was that you had to have some crazy story or some type of life experience. And I'm going like, I'm a white male from the Midwest who's had a normal average life, like grew up in a middle-class family. Like I'd never broken a bone. I'd never won a Nobel Peace Prize. I wasn't on American Idol. Like there was nothing that like, oh yeah, of course that dude should be a speaker, right? He won a gold medal. He cured cancer. Like there's nothing that on the surface that felt like it qualified me to be a speaker. And oftentimes early on in my speaking career, like I was the youngest person in the room, and I'm just like, what am I doing here? Like all these people listening to me, like I could be, this person's kid. And here I am on stage here. And so, yeah, there's like certainly like some what feels like some imposter syndrome of like, why me? And should I really be the person up here on stage? But one of the things that's most important that we talk a lot with speakers about is you have to solve one specific problem for one specific audience. And the dangerous thing is that whenever it comes to being a speaker, is that often we try to cast the net as far and wide as possible. And this isn't true with just speakers. This is any type of business, and this is true for podcasting. So when we talk about like, who do you speak to? It's like, I speak to people. I speak to humans. My message is for everybody. Or who's your podcast for? It's for everybody, right? Well, if it's for everybody, it's really for nobody, And so the same thing is true with a topic. What do you speak about? And if speakers are like, well, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. It's like, no, you can't. Like, that doesn't work. And even if you know a bunch about a lot of different things, or you're knowledgeable or interested in a bunch of different things, it doesn't mean that you should try to speak on a bunch of different things. So Rich, if like let's imagine we were looking for a good steak. One of the things we tell speakers is you want to be the steakhouse and not the buffet. And so if we are going out to eat, we're looking for a good steak, like we could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 different things that they offer and they're all mediocre, or you could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really, really well. Like, you want to be that steakhouse where it's like, I don't do tacos. I don't do lasagna. I don't do pasta. Like, I do steak, and that's the thing that I'm good at. And that's what you want to be as a speaker, because it makes it easier to attract the right type of clients and repel the wrong type of clients. If you're a vegetarian, you're not going to be going to the steakhouse, and that's okay. Like, that's what you want, though, is to attract the right type of people who are looking for this type of cuisine and this type of restaurant, versus trying to be all things to all people. And so again, it's counterintuitive, but the more narrow, the more focused you are, the easier it is to try to find the right type of gigs.
Right. And we see a lot in the nonprofit world, especially when they have speakers come to do, like, say, their fundraising events every year. Right. Some of those speakers speak at multiple nonprofits in one year, and they start to kind of trip up as they get towards the end of the cycle, as they start thanking the wrong audience as they get in there. Is that something that also part of the, I guess, not really imposter syndrome, but it's just kind of overselling yourself to do too many things?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it would kind of depend on the nature of what you're doing. If you are, if you're doing a lot of gigs, if you're just talking about like from a volume standpoint, then you absolutely need to be aware of like, what's this client that I'm working with, or what state am I in? And so I'm not saying the wrong things, that sort of thing. And some of that's just, you just want to make sure that you're being really, really professional. And again, especially if you're doing, I've done, 5 cities in 5 days and 5 totally different events. And so you got to be aware of where you're at and what's going on there. And so some of it's that, but yeah, I think where it becomes a little bit more tricky is where, you may be doing a nonprofit one day and then speaking to a school another day, and then a church another day, and then a banking credit union group another day. And then, like, you just have like these totally different worlds, and they're all just like very, very different in what it is that their challenges are, and what maybe the illustrations or stories that you may be using. And, this illustration works really, really well for a banking audience, but it doesn't make any sense in the church world or whatever. And so speaking to a consistent group makes it a lot easier for your talk to be polished and dialed, versus trying to give a whole bunch of variations of the same talk to a whole bunch of different types of audiences.
Definitely. And I just witnessed that at a fundraiser just recently, and the person, he realized it after he said the wrong organization when he thanked them. And you can tell he was just kind of in that burnout stage when he's done too many of these in a row. And he knew at that point that he had stepped on that landmine, and had to reel it back in somehow and try to win back the audience.
Yeah. That's never a good thing. An audience, a speaker doesn't want that. The audience doesn't want that. Like, I think there's also a misconception with speakers that, the audience is out to get you. Like, that's not the case at all. Like, the audience wants you to do well. Like, nobody wants to sit and watch a crappy speaker. Like, we want you to be a really good speaker. So we are, as an audience member, we are rooting for you to do well, and so it's up to you to make sure that you do the work and prepare to like show up and deliver. And I think like that's also something that like makes a great speaker. Is the best speakers in the world aren't the ones that just like, I'm going to just scribble a couple ideas on a napkin and hop up there and wing it and just kind of riff and talk off the top of my head and let's see what happens. No, like they spend a ton of time like really thinking through their word choice and their sentence structure, and thinking through, okay, this story leads into this, and then I'm going to transition here. Like, there's a lot of thought, and it may look like they're just talking off the top of their head, but there's really a lot of effort that goes into it behind the scenes. So it's kind of like, if you ever watch a comedian, you watch a Netflix special or or someone do stand up, like you think like, oh, they're just funny and they're just talking and they're just funny, but like there's a ton of work that goes in behind the scenes to think through, this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. And so it looks effortless, but really there's a ton of intentionality and preparation and practice that went on behind the scenes.
Definitely. And the more prepared a speaker is, I believe, the better the flow is for the speaker, and it keeps the audience engaged. Like you said, the audience isn't there to shoot arrows at them. They usually either A, paid money to be there, or B, are there to learn something. So they want to be there for a reason. They're not there because they're kicking and screaming that they had to sit in this auditorium or in this church or whatever, in this venue, to listen to a talking head up there. They want someone up there that is knowledgeable and is actually motivated to be there with you as well.
No, absolutely. Now, there is a point to that, though, that there's a difference between an audience that wants to be there and an audience that has to be there. So there's times where maybe you go speak at something and nobody was forced to be in there. They volunteered to be there. They wanted to attend there. It's a conference or a session or something. But there's also times where maybe you go speak at a company or a group and, everyone is forced to be there. And so you've got people like, for example, I did a lot in the education space. And so I would speak at a lot of school assemblies, did a whole bunch of high school assemblies. And a teenager's like, hey, man, I'm glad you got me out of class, but like, I don't really care what you have to say. And so it's an audience that has to be there. Right. And so that you have to do a lot more to earn their trust and get them on their side, get them on your side, so that you build that rapport and connection with them, so that whenever you bring something of application or knowledge to them, that you have their trust and you built that connection, that they're going to actually listen to you and not tune you out. So there's absolutely, like, it's good for any speaker who's speaking somewhere, like, is this the audience that I'm speaking to? Do they want to be here or do they have to be here? Because there's two totally different groups there.
Right. Especially the corporate world, when you have to do mandatory training or such like that, and the speaker comes in, you may not have their attention at all during that thing unless you say something amazing, and all of a sudden you see phones drop, pens drop, and their eyes actually open up. Otherwise, you have half the room looking, half the room not even really there. They're not present.
Yep, absolutely.
So as someone is growing and becoming a speaker, how do they know what to charge? Is there like a industry standard or something like that?
Yeah, the truth is that it varies, and it's all over the map. And so the answer, it depends, I know, is a horrible answer. So let me give you I'll give you a short answer, and then I'll give you a long answer. The short answer is we haven't had enough people who've asked us, hey, how much should I charge? And so we actually came up with a speaking fee calculator. It's totally free. If people want to check it out, it's over at myspeakerfee.com. Myspeakerfee.com. Again, it's totally free. You basically answer like 8-10 questions or something, multiple choice questions, and it'll spit out a number at the bottom of what you should be charging. Again, speaking fees is much more of an art than a science, but it at least get you in the ballpark there. And so I'll give you a couple of the categories we kind of look at there when we were putting this together. One of them is going to be your industry. You can charge more in some industries versus others. You can charge more speaking to corporations versus churches. You can charge more speaking to colleges versus kindergarten students, right? It's not that one's better or worse than the other. They're just, each pond, so to speak, is going to have kind of a different budgets and fee ranges that you can charge. So that's going to be a big factor. Another factor is going to be your experience. Meaning, if you're a brand new speaker, you're just getting started, you're figuring things out, you're probably not going to be able to charge as much as someone who has been at it for 5, 10, 20 years and is probably, frankly, just a better speaker than you are. And they're better at delivery, they're more polished, they've got their talk dialed in, and the product is just better. Another factor is going to be your marketing materials. So meaning specifically your website and demo video. Now, whether we like it or not, like, people judge books by their covers. And so we're all guilty of it. And so when someone, an event planner, a decision maker, is considering hiring you as a speaker, they're probably looking at you and 3, 4, 5 other speakers. And a lot of times they're looking at kind of that marketing material, that website, that demo video, to determine whether or not you're a good fit or who it is that they're going to hire. So that doesn't mean that you need to have spent tens of thousands of dollars on your stuff, but you need to make sure your stuff looks sharp, it looks professional. So there's several speakers sites I've looked at that I know for a fact they're a great speaker, but their website does not reflect that. And so it doesn't give me a ton of confidence in them as a speaker. And so again, whether we like it or not, we want to admit it or not, like, we all do it. And so if your website sucks, people assume that you may suck as a speaker. That's not fair, but that's oftentimes the case. So again, you just want to make sure that your stuff looks professional and looks sharp. So a lot of variables, a lot of factors that go into how much you should charge, but those are a few. But definitely, the shortcut is to go to myspeakerfee.com and play around there.
Awesome. And in almost every industry, the picture is what gets most people sold. So if you're a coach, they want you to look like a coach, kind of built, kind of professional looking, and fit the sport that you're teaching, where you're coaching. If you look like I'll hate to say a bum, they don't want to hire you unless you're Bill Belichick, because he dresses like that and still gets the results. But not everyone's a Bill Belichick. They want the person that looks the part and looks more professional as they go in.
Totally. Absolutely.
So in the last 2 years, as you know, the whole world has been flipped upside down, and I bet a lot of speaking has gone virtual. Is it a attainable goal to be a virtual speaker versus a full-time speaker?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this is going to sound weird, but hang with me. The pandemic has actually been one of the best possible things to happen to the speaking industry. And I'll explain what I mean there. So pre-pandemic, virtual speaking was a thing, but it wasn't a thing that anybody really took that seriously. So speakers didn't do a ton of it. Event planners didn't book it a lot. And so it's just kind of I don't know, it just kind of existed, and that was the extent of it. So live events was really the only thing that was the main game in town. But then when the pandemic hits, live events stopped, virtual becomes the only option. And it took everybody a couple months to kind of find their footing, like, okay, like pandemic's going to be here for a second, let's lean into virtual. And so for a while, virtual was then the only option. And so everybody leans into virtual. But what we're seeing now, and what we really talked a lot about what happened is, and how it's taking place now, is that now that hopefully we're coming out of the pandemic, I know we've been saying that for a while, but the live events continue to come back on a daily basis. People have missed being together, and now we get to be together. And so it's created like more demand for live in-person events. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that virtual events have gone away. If anything, we've seen that virtual events continue to stick around in addition to live events. So what that means is there's a lot of opportunity for speakers right now, and there's a lot of demand for speakers right now. So 15 years ago, when I was getting started as a speaker, the only option in terms of being a speaker was you had to get on a plane, you got to go somewhere, you got to leave the family. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. That's what it was. Whereas now, I know several speakers who are absolutely killing it with virtual, and they're home. They get to be home. They're able to do multiple gigs in the same day. And there's there's pros and cons with it. There's trade-offs. You know, you can do multiple gigs in the same day and never have to leave your home. There's nothing that compares to being in person with an audience, and that real human connection that you have, where you can high five and handshake and hug. So there's certainly like the trade-offs there, but virtual is absolutely a real viable option for speakers that didn't previously exist, that was really brought on by the pandemic. So virtual is definitely been around, and it's going to continue to be around.
Awesome. I know for my profession now, where we train soldiers and such, when the pandemic started, we started doing virtual, and then it was kind of a hybrid where we'd have a live audience, a live class in front of us, but we'd also broadcast it to those soldiers who couldn't get to us. Yeah. Or is there any speakers doing a hybrid version as well?
Absolutely. So not only hybrid at the time of the event. So for example, I was just at an event a week or so ago, and it's a mix of, you got a handful of people in the room, but then you also, it's being fed through a live stream elsewhere. And so, you know, the speaker on stage is talking to the people in the room and also talking to people that are watching online. So that happens a lot. But the other thing that this has created is opportunities to do kind of extended, like ongoing training and coaching. Meaning before, for the most part, what would happen is a speaker would come in, they'd speak, they'd give their keynote or workshop, they'd leave, and that's kind of the end of the transaction. Not only the transaction, but kind of the interaction with the audience. But now there's a lot more opportunities to do something ongoing, where maybe you come in, you speak, you give a keynote, workshop, and then maybe once a month for the next 6 months, you're doing a Zoom call with them and just kind of following up on, hey, here's what we talked about 3 months ago. Where do you feel, hey, yeah, you talked about this, and I feel we, as a company or an organization or group or as an individual, we feel stuck here. Can you kind of help us get unstuck? And so it helps kind of the implementation process way beyond the stage of that initial time. And so it's kind of what that does. It creates a better experience for the client, for the individual, where you can do something more ongoing. But it also creates an additional revenue opportunities for speakers, where it's kind of like, if you go to Chick-fil-A, you can get just the chicken sandwich, but you can also, would you like fries with that? Would you like a drink with that? Would you like a cookie with that? Would you like to upsize that stuff? And so all of a sudden it takes this one gig and turns it into multiple opportunities where you can generate increased revenue from the same client. So yeah, virtual has created a lot of really great opportunities for speakers right now.
And I bet that like you said, that increases your income funnel at that point as well. Instead of having that one hit wonder, now you're kind of like doing a series of talks to one group, and that Correct. Spreads through their networks as well. And then you wind up probably getting hired in other corporations.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's just a lot more opportunities. Whereas, before, if someone was doing 50 gigs a year, it's probably going to be 50 individual clients, give or take. But now you could do maybe only work with 10 clients or 20 clients, and so, but you're going deeper with those particular clients. So there's a lot of great opportunities right now for some of those hybrid type speaking opportunities.
So I know you do speaking as a full-time gig as well as the entrepreneur side with the speaker lab. Do you think it's possible to be a professional speaker without doing it full time?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think this is one of the benefits to the speaking industry. There's not necessarily a one size fits all. So there are people that do, 50, 75, 100 gigs a year, and they love it and they kill it doing that. And other people that do 5 gigs a year, and it's not that one's better or worse than another. You got to kind of got to decide like what makes sense for you. What is it that you're wanting to do? I will say that, that there's certainly going to be like the balancing act of, if you have, let's say, a full-time job and you're trying to do gigs and you're trying to get on the road, or you're trying to do virtual presentations, and it's a Thursday at noon, and you're like, dang, I gotta be at work, but at the same time I got a gig opportunity. So there's definitely going to be like some ebb and flow there, and some I guess kind of push and pull that you got to kind of navigate and figure out. But I'd also say it really depends on like what you're wanting to do with speaking. If you are you're wanting to ultimately become a full-time speaker, then at some point, like you're making that transition from the known, quote unquote, of having a full-time job, of having that quote unquote safety and security, to the unknown of I'm going all in. Because being a speaker, there's these big peaks and valleys, meaning that there are times of the year where you're doing a ton of gigs and it's busy and there's a lot going on and you may be making bank. And then there are times where, like around the holidays, for example, like nobody's booking speakers around Christmas. And so it's just December slow. And that's just the way that after basically from Thanksgiving until, the first week or so of the year, there's just not a lot of stuff that's happening. So if you can book a gig in December, that's a huge, huge win. But it tends to be a little bit slower. Whereas like September or April, maybe big months that may have a lot of bookings and opportunities going on. So you absolutely have to manage both the time element of how much time and effort you're putting into it, but also the cash and kind of the cash flow of when events are happening over the course of the year.
Awesome. And what are different opportunities for speakers? Like we spoke earlier about churches, corporations, nonprofits. Are there different categories and opportunities?
Yeah. So one of the things we talk through is there's 7 different industries, primary industries that book and hire speakers. So you're going to have corporations, associations, nonprofit, churches, faith-based. You're going to have government and military. You're going to have colleges and universities, and then you're going to have high education, so K through 12. So you have, and even within that, you have a whole bunch of other subsets and groups that exists. So corporations is a big group. There's a lot of opportunities that exist within corporations. Same with like associations, and same with like, education. When I was doing a lot with education, I didn't do anything with elementary students, barely did anything with middle school students, but I did a lot with high school students. But a high school audience is going to be different than an elementary audience, and a high school audience is going to be different than a college audience. And even within colleges or within high schools, you may focus on speaking to teachers, you may focus on speaking to parents. So there's a lot of opportunities that exist, but the more narrow, the more focused you are, the easier it is to start to be able to find the right type of opportunities that make sense for you.
Outstanding. I've learned that too. Speaking to veteran groups or speaking to a high school is 2 different things completely. And then if you even cut that high school down to a middle school, you really have to cut the speech into something that's relevant to them, that they understand and they can feed off of to move towards their high school and their future goals in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Every audience is going to be slightly different. There's always going to be nuances based on, who you're speaking to, geographically, what the nature of the presentation is, how long the presentation is. Like there's just a lot of variables that go into it that factor into, what makes a good presentation. But that's, again, kind of goes back to, once you're clear on, I speak to this group and I solve this problem and I can do it in this context. So I'll give you an example. Like I knew for me, I'm really good in like a 1-hour block. And some speakers that are like, hey, you can't cover anything in an hour. I need 3 full days with people. I want to go deep in the weeds. And I'm like, boy, I'd be miserable over 3 days, but I know like in 1 hour, I can cover a lot of ground. And so again, it's not that one's better or worse, but you just have to know like what makes sense for you, what it is you're trying to do. And then also for the type of audience that you may be speaking to, what's the best way to present the solution to the problem that they have.
Exactly. And in your opinion, Grant, what makes a great speaker?
Well, I mean, it certainly is. It can be a little subjective. There's some speakers that someone watches and they're like, "Ah, that was amazing," and others that are like, "Ah, they were okay." But I think the more genuine, the authentic, the more human that they can be, the better. What I mean by that is sometimes you see a speaker that is very robotic and formulaic. It feels like they are just regurgitating a script. It feels like they're just deep in their head of, okay, now I say this, and then I take 5 steps over here, and and I do this with my hands, and it's just like they're just like regurgitating this whole thing, and it just doesn't feel like they're really engaged or present with the audience. But you want a speaker who feels like, no, like you are a human talking to a collection of other humans. So like act like a human. And so I think that most people have a really good gauge on, is this a person authentic? Are they genuine? Are they here? Are they just passing through? Is their body here, but their mind is elsewhere? Like, you want people that are just fully engaged and fully locked in. And so I think audience members tend to have a good gauge on that. So I think the more authentic, the more genuine, the more transparent that you can be, the more you're going to relate with and connect with your audience.
And I think all those points are very valid there. I mean, me as a speaker, I know I don't like to stand behind the podium at all.
Mm-hmm.
I like to move, and I like to be I like to walk into the audience sometimes, just so I can be closer to them and have them feel like I'm one of them, not someone above them or in front of them being a higher being or whatever.
Totally.
I think that makes me more comfortable and them more comfortable. And I think that's just the style that fits me the best. And some people are great behind a podium. That's where they like to stand. And,
Yep.
and like you said, there's tons of different shoes people can wear to be speakers, but you got to find your niche and do it the right way.
Yeah, totally agree.
If you could give some three pieces of advice to an up and coming speaker, what would that be, Grant?
Yeah, I think, again, kind of going back to one of the things we talked about is making sure that you're really, really clear on who you speak to and what you speak about and what problem that you solve. I'd also say that I think just having a long-term perspective on the business, I think sometimes it's easy to, I think of it kind of like, if you wanted to lose weight or get in shape, we all know what we're supposed to do. It's really, really simple. You need to pay attention to what you eat. You need to exercise. Like, that's it. And same when it comes to booking speaking gigs. It's not overly complicated. Like, we can tell you what to do. So it's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. I know what I'm supposed to eat and what I'm not supposed to eat, but man, donuts taste a lot better than kale. And I know that I'm supposed to be exercising, but boy, it's just a lot more fun to sleep in some days. And so we know the things we're supposed to do, but it still requires effort and discipline. And so if you treat speaking like a hobby, you're going to get hobby results. And if you treat it like a business, you're going to get business results. So be clear on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then do the work, put in the work to get the results that you're going for.
Awesome advice. Thanks, Grant. What's the best way for someone to get in touch with you on a personal level, or to come speak, or even just to chat with you, or even to get involved in your courses?
Yeah, I know that anybody listening to this podcast probably listen to other podcasts. So check us out over at the Speaker Lab podcast. The Speaker Lab podcast. We got nearly 400 episodes there, so that's definitely one to check out. Check out my the speaking fee calculator, myspeakerfee.com, that we talked about earlier. And then if people have questions or anything I can help with, feel free to shoot me an email, grant@thespeakerlab.com, grant@thespeakerlab.com, and always happy to help however I can.
Awesome, Grant. Thanks for taking some of your time to hang out with us today.
You bet, brother. I appreciate it.